I'll throw that to him. A very good morning, Joseph Kabuleta, and welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Happy independence.
Thank you.
Uganda at 60.
Yeah.
You've lived the greater part of these 60 years.
I've lived 50
of them.
Yeah.
No doubt about that. Let me ask you, of the 50 years that you've been around, I can say surely that 35 you were on top of the game, knowing what is happening, you understood what was going on. Just reflect on Uganda's independence within your prism, how you look at things.
First of all, even when the years that I didn't live, I took time to study them and study the situation that there was.
That's right.
Before independence. I'd take an interest as somebody who has an interest in this country. And I found a peculiar resemblance between the time before independence and the time that we are in right now.
Yeah.
For instance, one of the reasons, you remember there was serious issues of land and the Bataka movement, mostly here in Uganda, and then there was a serious problem of farmers. Bataka
is different from Bataka.
I said Bataka.
You said Bataka. The Bataka movement.
Yes.
Yeah.
And and then there was also a big issue of farmers getting very little from their produce, and Indian middlemen, especially middlemen, getting a lot of money off the farmers' hard labor and selling, of course, to the European market. And that's a system that had been set up by the colonialists, who deliberately created a three-tier system where, of course, the whites at the top and the Indians are in the middle, and the indigenous Ugandans at the very bottom. And so those are the things that really bothered people, because it was so difficult. I asked somebody who was of age at even at the time that Amin expelled the Indians, and he told me you could not, as a black person, even start a clinic in Kampala or even a law firm. Everything was dominated by Indians. So a black doctor would go and study and somehow either work in government or work under an Indian or something. So he said there was a total domination. And of course, Indians are very bright people, to be honest. That's why they are Silicon Valley and all that. They can do all sorts of things. Yeah. In Uganda, we've known them mostly for business, but they are more than that. Their talents are multifaceted. So there was no space whatsoever, for anybody to express themselves at the time, which of course is not to say that what Amin did was right, but then also there was a reason why he did it, and only he could have done it the way he did it. But then I'm going back to independence. I'm saying that, so the black indigenous farmer was producing all the goods that they were told to produce, which the British told us to produce, because they segmented all these countries that were under them, and each one was supposed to produce something. And of course, they gave us tea, they gave us coffee, they gave us cotton. Okay, they gave Kenya a lot of tea and other things, wheat and all that. But now, the colonialists had a lot of power, because they even decide what sports you play. For instance, when they went to Asia, they decided to give them cricket. And now Indians play cricket because the British introduced cricket. They actually introduced almost all the international sports.
That's right.
When they came here, they gave us football. Now we love football because the colonialists gave us football. If you had given us cricket, it would be like India.
Cricket,
So anyhow, so they gave us those things to produce, which were actually lucrative, even in their raw form, even as producers of just raw material. And they were lucrative, because if it wasn't for the Indian businessman, the African farmer would be much better off. So now there was a fight for the Indian businessman, and that was one of the issues at independence that was raised. Now, go 60 years later to what we currently have right now, we have a scenario which is almost the same. Somebody is growing, let's say, cotton, let's say in the region of Rwenzori, that is Kasesa and the nearby places, and is selling it at very little money, and somebody who is a middleman is getting all the profit, and taking it and selling it at the market in Mombasa, or even tea, for instance, where you ask a farmer in Toro how much he's getting, and he's getting less than 500 shillings a kilo. after all the investment in planting, in paying reapers, in fertilizers and all that, he gets less than 500. Now that same tea is sold for about 4,700 at the Mombasa market. So somebody is benefiting of the hard labor of these people, farmers, just like it was at independence. If you go, for instance, milk in southwestern Uganda, you find that there are people buying milk there at 300 shillings or 400 shillings or 500 shillings a litre, and selling it at 2,500 in Kampala. So now somebody who raises the cows, grazes them, milks them, gets 500 shillings, that's on the higher side, and the person who just transports, freezes that milk and transports it, gets 2,000 shillings per litre. Now the middlemen. So now we find ourselves in a very similar scenario, where the people who are doing all the hard work are getting very little. And now this has been, almost created more or less in the same way as it was by the colonialists. The only difference now is that the oppressors are people who look like us, not the whites. And even the middlemen, they may be of whatever skin complexion, but the one thing they have in common is they have political connections. That's why they are able to do that. For instance, there was a big issue in vanilla. People had gone deep into vanilla planting, and vanilla is still up to now a very lucrative crop in the world, because it's used for so many things. But then a vanilla law was passed, then people had to have licenses to do any sort of trade in vanilla, and of course people gave up, because eventually they were working for the middleman who had the licenses, which licenses were given out by connected people. Okay, actually what happens, usually one connected person gets all the licenses and starts dishing them out to people who will eventually bring the tithe of their profits to him. Let me use church terminology. So I give, if you're a businessman, I give you a license to go and be the middleman. You go and make profits. If I am the one politically connected, you have to give me a slice of that, and then I give out to so many people, so I just sit home and get a lot of money for being politically connected. That's what's happening right now. Almost the same as it was at independence, and that's very unfortunate, because we've had 60 years to change so many things. Now when you hear about the president talking about chauvinism, what the white man did, how we fought for independence and so on, and where is the benefit for anybody? I mean, what's the difference between a farmer who lived in 1960 and the one who is currently here? The only difference is the one in 1960 had some hope that when we get rid of these white men, life will be better. And actually, for a lot of that time, it was better. Okay, at the peak of the cooperatives, when people were selling, a lot of their produce for good money and actually getting rich of it. But now it has gone down and down and down, and the president is preaching about value addition. But before you add value, the farmer would want just to sell his produce at the original, raw material value. Just give me value for what I've done. Now go and add your value if you want. That's right. But I'm not even getting a fraction of what the raw produce that I have should fetch for me. And now that's a very, very big problem. But of course, I know he uses the value addition as a diversionary thing, which is classic Museveni. So because when you talk about, they says, no, Africa is losing. And now that's the other thing. Okay, excuse me, because I'm going straight into his speech, which I find so interesting. Because
we shall be, let me just hold you in your tracks there before we delve into his speech. But let me just ask, with regard to your look at Uganda's situation right now in light of independence and 60 years, you seem to suggest that, which could be either true or debatable, that we are unable to let ourselves off the grip of neocolonialism. That what we are experiencing right now is only a modified form of rule that is conditioned and conducted, I must be very specific about that, by the white man.
Well, I'm not talking about the white man, because I'll tell you this, they would not have given us independence unless they knew they had set a culture where would be subservient to them economically, almost for, the entirety of whatever. So they come, they create a system that they will always have a control over. So the neocolonialism is unavoidable. They establish an education system. Nobody gives you an education system that you're going to use to overthrow them. they give you an education system that suits them.
Yeah.
So now we still have the education system that they gave us. We still more or less study the things that they want us to study. So our educated people come out still with an inferiority complex.
That's right.
And you know, and there's a complex that everything that those people have is actually, I see it more among educated people than uneducated people, because the education is part of that. Okay, where and we've not modified that whatsoever, because go even, I mean, we used to have civic education before Museveni came and removed it, but in civic education at least we would study about Ugandan heroes. Okay, I would study about people who fought for independence, and you know, would look at where they went wrong, what they did right. And the idea is that what you people who are studying are going to be leaders at some stage. So you should learn from people who are like you. But my point is, neocolonialism is all across this continent.
Yeah.
But Africa is still providing raw, you know, raw materials, and you know, for the other people to make a profit.
Yes.
That is, but even then, within that context, other countries have done good for themselves because they had better leadership. We have not. For instance, Zimbabwe, I mean Botswana, is a country which immediately had, you know, way back, soon after independence, had a president who ruled 3 terms, then established a term limit, eventually died of cancer, and then they have had exchanges exchanges of presidents since then. And so now their income per capita is almost 8 times ours because of, you know, good leadership and good policy, and leadership which actually cares about the people, and especially the foundation that was set by that man. Now, are they suffering neocolonialism? Yes. Is Kenya suffering from the same thing? Yes. They have just had a proper election, which at least is as close to free and fair as you would expect here, and they're having the same problems. So why is it that we are the ones who have never in 60 years had a single peaceful exchange of power? Not once. Okay? Why are we the only ones who have never had an election that is even anywhere close to credible in all those 60 years? So we cannot run behind neocolonialism. The world order is set in a certain way. We are in a certain place, and those people who were former colonial masters will always be in a certain place. But even within our place,
we must be able to.
Yeah, we are doing very badly in comparison to countries which are in the same situation that we find ourselves. Now, when the president goes and does his typical grandstanding, you know, giving big ideas of how Africa is losing a lot of money because of selling raw materials and not adding value to their products. And somewhere along the way I thought, can somebody go and pinch him and remind him that he's the president of Uganda, a poor country which he has made poorer, because he talks like he's the president of Africa. And I'm wondering, hey, come on, forget Africa. There is somebody who wants to hear a message of hope, perhaps who is starving in Katakwi, or who needs some in Uganda. But obviously he wants to impress the presidents whom he invites, so he has all these powerful ideas of what Africa can do. I mean, forget Africa. You're a president of Uganda, and the people of this country have expectations of you, of course, which you are not going to meet. We know that, 36 years on. But then, do not mock us by, you know, making it as if you're the president of the continent and we do not exist as a country. I mean, you're in charge of a very poor country. So if you have good ideas, how come those ideas have not translated into the livelihoods of the people in your country first, before you talk about the continent?
Talking about laying foundations, over the last 36 years, the national resistance movement has grappled with the need to transform from the kind of subsistence farming that is very much, well, looked down upon by the president and many of his the people who think like him, and it's debatable that we can actually get there. But when you speak about leadership, I do not know how to phrase this particular question, but leadership is a product of just about every one of us, from the family to the top. The other day, a gentleman was very unequivocal in his submission, and that is the spokesperson of the Ministry of Defense. He told me on Morning at NTV that we Ugandans are responsible for the kind of trouble that we are in. We give the military the kind of people that abduct them, the kind of people that commit human rights abuses, the kinds of people that mime them, and that until we are able to look into ourselves, then some of those problems that we want to address will not be solved. Do you think that we should stop looking at Museveni as the problem and look at ourselves as the catalysts for the kind of change that we want?
Of course, that's what the UPDF spokesperson told you is typical escapism that is perhaps derived from his boss, the president, where you do all sorts of wrong things, and if you're a commander, if you're in a commanding position, how can you say that if you're a parent and your children are going around stealing, how can anybody else be to blame apart from yourself? If you are in a, and that's what leadership is. That's what the presidency is. Now, of course, we are to blame because we trusted so much. Okay, because Museveni came 1986, we gave him almost a carte blanche for the first 10 years to do whatever it was he pleased. In that time, he destroyed systems quietly, outside of the blare of the media and so on. He personalized the army, he destroyed systems, he made himself completely in control, took control over almost everything. Now when we woke up and realized that this person is a con man, he's not what he said he was, it was too late, because when you stand up now and try to fight him, he's in control everywhere. The courts, the what, everything is under his control. So now maybe you can blame us for the time we trusted him, okay, which we did. But then thereafter, we've been, our hands are tied by him, but we will continue doing whatever it is we can. That's the reality. And we'll eventually rid ourselves of this big problem. But the sort of escapism that you are the ones who send people here to the army, how come those people go and abduct people and they are not punished? How come we have policemen who are beating up journalists and so on, and nobody comes, and there is no sort of even reprimand, much less imprisonment, anything? So of course it's not us, because this is the people, and eventually we shall get a different sort of leadership. And now leadership means leadership. It means setting the direction,
very quickly,
the direction for the country. That's what it means. Now we have been we have had a leadership that has sent us in all the wrong directions. That's the reality.
All right, Joseph Kabuleta, let's take a short break right now and return with this conversation, looking and reflecting on the 60 years of independence for Uganda in light of celebrations that included a feat at Kololo yesterday, with President Yoweri Museveni entertaining his guests who came from across the region and indeed Africa. Stay with us, we'll be right back.
You're watching Morning at NTV. From your docks to the rest of the world, speak to us for all your international...
Uganda, like it is always going to be a Museveni's Uganda, which it is not going to be. So then you discuss the scenarios here. Why is there a lot of what? Why is there a lot of corruption? Space is shrinking. Why is there a lot of intimidation? Why aren't there free and fair elections and all that? And you're discussing something that is about to come to an end. Okay? Now, the difference between me and people like that is I do not have a Museveni in my mind when I'm thinking about Uganda. For me, it's yesterday's news. I am looking far past him to a different kind of Uganda, where all the things that you are talking about that define the Uganda we've had in the last 3.5 decades are gone. And somebody has to get there with the intention of taking those things away and creating a proper country that people can be proud of. And that is why I joined politics. Not to fit into a system that has been created by somebody else. In any case, that person is about to leave us. But to come and change that system, not to analyze. You see, there is that thinker who had on his tombstone, on his grave, I don't like to mention him because I don't like him that much, but anyway, he had this to say. He says, the intellectual of today has done very good, I might have missed some words, but you get the point, has done well to analyze the problems that society faces currently. He says, the point, however, is to change it, not to discuss it, to change it. Now the difference is, I'm not here to discuss Uganda and Museveni. No, I'm here to change. Okay, now there are people who will discuss. People like Simon Kagwanja tell us what you know and so on, independence and what. Now, I'll be a part of the discussion in as far as it is leading to me changing it. That's the point. That's my point. That's my desire and that's my goal. We talk about government being in charge of instruments of power. Government is supposed to be something beyond the ruling party. Okay? There are systems under government that are not supposed to be subject to whoever it is that is, you know, in political power at the time. Like, let's say, the civil service, the military, and all that. Now, of course, now all those institutions are being held captive by this current ruling party. But those are things that can be reversed. And I want to tell you that.
You're watching Morning at NTV.
Hello, we're glad you're still with us here on Morning at NTV. If you've been with us now, if you're just joining us, welcome on board. We're just wondering, where have you been? Well, here is Morning at NTV. The hashtag on Twitter is Morning at NTV. Be part of it. And the conversation is flowing, and we are reflecting on Uganda at 60. In light of celebrations yesterday, on the 9th of October, 60 years of independence for the country. And of course, there's a lot that we heard from the president and his guests, presidents of other nations within the region and indeed across Africa. We've also heard from those that are political commentators looking at the developments within and outside of our own countries and how these provide a pattern that Uganda should be able to follow. We are talking to Joseph Kabuleta, and we are now joined by Sarah Birete, the Executive Director at the Center for Constitutional Governance. I would love to throw the very first in this segment as we return to Sarah Birete. A very good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Happy Independence.
Do we have independence?
Why that sigh?
You know, independence in simple terms means freedom, liberty, and human dignity. Simple definition of independence.
Yeah.
So if you had to score our against these indicators of independence, I think we would put it at 30%. How do we treat each other in this country? Human rights violations, land grabbing, the way we treat our most vulnerable, the way, you know, that's how you define a society. What is the social protection of the most vulnerable people in this country? What is the human dignity? What liberties do we enjoy as citizens? I come from the civil society sector. We are regulated by 11 agencies. 11 agencies regulating NGOs. That is a waste of taxpayers' money, first of all. That is a sign of a high level of incompetence. Because one agency can regulate an entity. Or you can have a one-stop center for people's regulation and compliance. But that's also a level of crippling down of citizens' voices in the country. You look at the state of political parties. My co-panelist comes from the political party side. Do we have parties to speak of in this country? I don't think we have any political party that can qualify as a party in an independent country.
You come from the civil society,
yes.
And I must be very honest about the fact that the civil society in Africa is very much in bed with the West. Most of them are the funders of civil society organizations. And when we reflect on aspects like independence, I do not think the civil society is independent in itself. More like you are a conduit of the West. Now, reflect on that.
You know, Chris, if you go under the Geneva Conventions, international organizations and communities enter into partnership with people. They don't enter into partnership with the regimes. So if you have diplomatic presence in Uganda, for example, EU, which is under heavy bashing, the EU relations with Uganda are not with the NRM regime. NRM regime is just the current host. The EU relations with Uganda are relations between the citizens of European countries and the citizens of Ugandans. We have a budget which is 50% funded for the recurrent budget, and development budget is 100% donor funded. Is our government a conduit of foreigners? When these diplomatic communities are here, they give 75% of their funding to government, give 25 to private sector and civil society. So if we go by ratios of funding, who is the agent of foreigners in this country? It's government.
That's interesting there. That sounds more like a statistical abstract.
No.
Help me wade through that.
No, it's actually very true, because we have scenarios where, for instance, when the oil pipeline, government is trying to push for it and saying nobody is going to stop it. The only trouble is, of course, there are people who are funding it who are from Europe. And then the president is saying we are a sovereign country, but you are not funding your thing. And the company that is mostly funding is actually registered in France. So the European Union has jurisdiction as long as they are the company that is funding is from their place. Now, so you have a scenario where school children are gotten, apparently parents eventually said not without their permission, to go and demonstrate. They go to the European Union, leave our thing.
They are escorted with convoys of police.
Yes, and then when people who are opposed to the pipeline come and they appeal to the same European Union, then they say you're agents of foreign interests. But the government itself is going to the European Union. So who is and who isn't? It looks like they are the ones who have the right to go, because as she said, our budget is heavily funded by foreign entities, very heavily funded by foreign entities. And it's just as well that those foreign entities don't just fund the government, but they actually fund people who are attempting to pull civil society together and bring some things about. So the reality is that the ideal situation is that civil societies are funded by themselves and government is funded by itself. But that's an ideal that is not anywhere near us. But
just on funding, just a little bit. You know, ideally, citizens would fund their work in civil society, in political parties.
That's right.
But we have 12.5 million Ugandans stuck in poverty. You have every year, given our population growth of 3% and our increase in graduates, we are supposed to create 650,000 jobs every year as a country, and that takes us to 1780 jobs per day. Whose problem is it that we are donor dependent, both government and non-government?
And do you know how many jobs we are creating pre-COVID? Out of the 650 we need to create in order to absorb the people who are coming out of institutions, we create 149,000.
Now, gentleman and lady, let's move away from the lamentation. Because many times when you lament too much, you fail to understand how to move forward. This nation requires to move forward, and each one of us, from me, a broadcaster on NTV, to you, a leader of a political party, to Sarah Birete, a player within the civil society, there is something you can do or trigger within that space to begin to condition the kind of trajectory that we need to take. Where should we begin, Sarah?
You know, and majority of African countries are in this caught in this cobweb, save for the gross human rights violations where Uganda exceeds. But in terms of failure to develop and domesticate the economy, many of the African countries are really culprits in that field. President Ruto had the key points on what leaders need to do.
That's right.
Except he again said, let's create policies, as if policies do not exist. The East African community has 4 pillars. The customs union, common markets, a protocol, the monetary union, and then the political federation, which is the last. I know that Uganda is interested in the last pillar without fast tracking the first, because the federation, the integration is phased in phases. So the East African communities have failed to implement the common markets protocol fully. And it's not that policies do not exist. Business community that the leaders were calling out, they have been moving. Actually, they are ahead of governments. So what I would call on governments is domesticate the economy. Develop the economies. But to do that, you must be disciplined, fiscal discipline. You must end corruption and impunity in economic issues. You have seen recently the president, in the run-up to celebrations, writing cheats for his relatives to be helped. This one got a loan, he can't pay. I mean, all Ugandans are stuck in that situation. So when you start handpicking without procedures of how people can access help, in case money exists, but also the same government has been failing to pay salaries on time. It's only now that they've sent money for salaries in this quarter. But from July, people have been struggling with the basic salaries, government workers. So these are governments that must first develop fiscal discipline, must cut down their cost. Because the bloated administrative expenditure in Uganda today cannot enable Uganda to develop economically.
How do we empower ourselves as a people economically?
First of all, what she said, the integration, the common market, that's something that's of interest to me because all the other countries practice protectionism.
That's right.
Uganda is the only one which opens itself up.
Entirely.
Entirely. Now, the president even praised that. It would be admirable if other people were doing the same, but they are not. The president praised it and said that why should Ugandans buy rice expensively when Tanzania produces it cheaper, and our rice farmers who have produced rice end up with the rice which they cannot sell because we are importing rice from Tanzania. He says our brothers. The truth is, in 2015 when Magufuli became president, the first thing he did was stopping importation of agricultural produce from Uganda. They were getting a lot of maize specifically from here. He said we should produce our own maize. That's how they ended up middle income, for real. And of course he doubled down on us being middle income, but that really is baloney. Because, I mean, these are not things, okay, maybe COVID taught people that you can come up with fake figures and push people in a certain direction based on fake figures. But, I mean, what was our GDP per capita in 2019? I mean, what percentage of growth should we have to have reached the 45, $45 billion GDP? It doesn't add up. Just that simple. Because we should have perhaps moved at 10-12% to come from where we are to where he says we are, and yet we haven't been moving at that percentage. Actually, we were less than 5 during COVID. So how do we jump there? But anyway, this whole lack of protection, Kenya practices extreme protectionism. When they didn't want maize from Uganda, they said it had a lot of aflatoxins. Okay, theirs has more aflatoxins than ours.
When they didn't want eggs,
and when they didn't want eggs, they come up with something. Now, even at the Mombasa port, Ugandan businessmen are complaining they are being very badly treated. These are not good neighbors, business-wise, but because they are watching their own lane, trying to develop themselves. It's Uganda where we open ourselves up for the job market. Anybody can come and get a job. We open ourselves up to every agricultural produce and everything, and other countries are not reciprocating. So how are we going to develop when it is one-sided love? That's what it is. There is no relationship that works on one-sided love.
Interesting. So, okay, let me throw this to Sarah. When the president speaks about the fact that he is dismayed and uncomfortable about the comprador actors and agents that seem to be apparently frustrating his work, including the fact that the European Union is on looking down to frustrate his efforts that he says could tilt him towards Russia. We've already seen that happening. The congratulatory message from Vladimir Putin speaking of the fact that he appreciates the friendly relations, but he's more hinged on aspects that will ensure regional security and stuff like that. Where is the president? Well, it's a question that somebody out there listening might be like, but Chris, we ask this question a lot. Where is the president going wrong?
I know the president
is he held hostage?
No. The president in the speech heavily bashed people he called collaborators or foreign agents.
That's right.
But in the same speech, he confirmed that he's a foreign agent in the Pineti coffee deal, and he said, "You Daily Monitor, come for me. I am here. I am the one." So the contradictions are on in the same speech are really glaring. Two, the conduct of President Museveni and prioritizing foreign investors against government investors also confirms him as a chief foreign agent in this country. That is his policy. The way he romanticizes foreign investors, the way he defranchises local investors, especially those who are not closely known to him, that has been his conduct in the last 36 years.
It more looks like a deliberate move, an economic design. But
under his regime, we have closed 9 local banks. When Parliament inquired into that, there were no sufficient reasons to warranty the closure of local banks. It was like a political motivation.
Okay, so the economics of the economic landscape doesn't look really cozy to look forward to. What should we look at? Education, transforming our education system so that we can begin to learn from a very early stage what we ought to do in the future.
The reality is that actually is a longer term thing, and a lot more difficult to achieve, by the way, because there's a lot
What is easier? What is more practical?
What's more practical is getting rid of this regime. If I was to be entirely honest, that's it. That's the solution that is going to help put into place all other solutions. But I'll tell you this: that the whole, when you see where we stand as a country, the level of poverty, the level of destitution, basic lack of infrastructure to produce, to push across anything. For instance, the other day, the parish development model was launched amidst a blaze of publicity.
Yeah.
Like, how many parishes have received their 17 million? Now it's almost time for the 100 million for the second year. Some haven't received the 17 million. And even in districts where they actually gave enough money for every parish to receive 17 million, it went missing. Their parishes, you are saying they got 2.5 million.
All right, Joseph. All right, Joseph.
So now just mention it.
Yeah,
and yet we have, when he comes to speak, and this is how Museveni obfuscating and trying to go around the real issues. He comes and starts talking about, Africa has never taken anybody to the moon, and so on. And he says, don't forget the moon. We want.
All right, so thank you very much. But let's take a break. When we return, we shall be looking at what should be our new frontier as a country in terms of economic development. The people who chose the moon as their frontier did that more than 60 years ago, just as we were trying to gain independence. Perhaps after 60 years of our own independence, it wouldn't be a bad idea to go to the moon after all. We shall go for a break and return after that.
There are countries that reversed those things in a matter of 10 years, even less, okay? Getting back institutions, taking power out of the, of the clenched fist of one man, where he's in total control of every institution. He does what he wants, he says what he wants, he gets what he wants when he wants it. Now that's the kind of politics that we are trying to change, the NRM politics. But the challenge, as far as I'm concerned, is to convince Ugandans to look beyond. Museveni is a very temporary problem. In any case, at the end of its, problemness. Of course, that's not a word in English, but you understand what I'm saying. Now, why should I focus? Why should a country with an average age of 16 years?
60.
Average age of 16.
16, okay.
16 years. Focus on somebody who is 80 and on his way out. We have the luxury of just waiting him out, and in any case, getting him off one way or the other. But he's on his way out, one way or the other. So now after that, we have a country to look after. And we have to get back to what Uganda wants to be past Museveni. He has worked so hard to build the country in his own image. But now that image is going. And now I want people to think beyond.
And I think that thrusts us into the real subject that we are discussing today. How does Uganda look like at 60?
That's the thing. First of all, the 60, of course, there is the 36 of Museveni. But I've told you this before that. I said this before elections. And I told you that the trouble with all the elections we've had, there have been referendums on Museveni should go, Museveni shouldn't go. Because none of the other major leading parties actually presented a true picture of what you are bringing after Museveni, apart from we are removing Museveni. Now, and then there was a lot of activism rather than politics. Now, what we are trying to do here is say, okay, we are removing it, but this is what we are actually bringing. Because it's not just enough to say to somebody that leave that place, leave your job, come to this job. What do you have to offer me? Okay? The only way to entice them is to tell them that, okay, you have this job, this is what you're earning, we have a better working environment, we have better payment, and so on and so forth. So the thing is, there is a picture that we are trying to paint of a Uganda post-Museveni, which I want Ugandans to get in their head.
You're watching Morning at NTV.
Welcome back. Before we went into the break, Joseph Kabuleta was making a point about the PDM, the Parish Development Model, as one of the plethora or litany of interventions that are being made to ensure that Uganda becomes transformed into the kind of country that we need, especially in light of the fact that we've been independent for 60 years. I would like to engage him a little bit further on exactly what he wanted to make in terms of this particular point.
No, you missed that introduction. Totally misrepresented what I was saying.
Okay.
What I was saying is that
correct
a government that cannot put into place anything. They've lost the infrastructure to put anything in place. It's total chaos, anarchy. So that even the PDM, which was apparently some kind of project, pet project of the president, the money hasn't got to the districts. People up country have received some in Kampala, have not received, some parishes in Kampala have not received. And so what I'm saying,
it has a time frame to it.
The dysfunctionality of this government means that regardless of what interventions you might put, and by the way, do not ever believe that there is any intervention that Museveni can put that is intended to take people out of poverty. Poverty is his personal scheme. Okay, the things that were making people rich, he took them all away. Now we find ourselves in a place where when we get rid of him, we are going to have to reverse and almost go back to 1986 before we can start now going forward. We'll have to take so many steps backwards to the time when cooperative societies were functional, when systems functioned, when hospitals were functional, where schools were places where people go because they are bright. The thing is that I know when I went to school, I know so many students who went from S1 to S4 without paying school fees because they were bright. And every time the headmaster would call them and say, tell your parent to bring school fees, we are going to chase you. But they never chased them because they were bright and because the schools were being heavily funded by government. So they could afford not to get rid of brilliant students just because they were poor. Now, try that today. Even if you are going to be the next, rocket scientist or whatever it is, there is no school you are going to go to in Uganda. Now, I know that there were people, now that time, there were things that worked. Ask anybody who went to university in those years, how it was. How you go to university, that's the end of, any financial burden for your parent. Everything is there, and just ask. And that was despite the fact that there was somebody who was fighting a legitimately elected government. Okay? Today we would call him a terrorist because the word guerrilla does not exist today. Anybody who uses force and disruption to push a political point is called a terrorist. So in spite of the fact that there were terrorists fighting that government, still there were things which were functional. Now I was of age at that time and I could see there were certain things which were functional. I was staying in Masindi, going to school in Namiryango. I couldn't pass through Luwero to come to Kampala, so I had to go through Lira and Soroti and Mbale, all the way go around. It took me 2 days to come come from Masindi to arrive in Namiryango. 2 days. But when I got to, there were things which worked. Now, right now, there is no, I can go straight through it, but everything is dysfunctional.
Talking about dysfunctional things, he seems to suggest, and rightly so, that perhaps the software is completely broken down, so much so that you don't even want to think about the hardware. But in the break, you spoke about leadership. Right now, I want to be very candid. We have a political leader on the show today morning. That is, of course, a president of the National Economic Empowerment Dialogue Party. When you look at the leaders we have right now, if, for example, the argument that President Museveni could be the problem is put out of the picture, who can lead this country, or what set of persons can lead this country and be able to say, here is the direction we are taking, and this is what is going to take us forward?
President Museveni, maybe to give credit to him, there are things he has achieved.
No doubt.
His biggest undoing was manipulating the constitution for selfish needs, failing the transition mechanism in this country, transition of power at presidential level, which has never happened for 60 years of independence. We should never forget that point, that we have never peacefully transitioned from one leader to another.
That is not to say peaceful transition is the
That is an indictment on all of us as Ugandans, and it is a failure of leadership in this country.
Okay.
So the first thing we must fix going forward is leadership. We must fix the leadership question. We must make sure that Article 1 is not theoretical. Power belongs to the people. Today, power doesn't belong to the people. It is a fallacy. Power belongs to the military. The gun can cow anybody down. The gun has the power. And even when you thought the gun would restrain, the people with the gun would restrain themselves, they attacked Parliament during the removal of age limit, meaning they are superior to the Constitution. So before we fix the leadership questions in this country, the rest of the things is a waste of time, because the system cannot hold. The moral fiber has broken down. As Joseph said it, even if the parish development model is good, this regime cannot implement it because of corruption and impunity. Simple.
You know, there was a scenario in 1967 when Obote abrogated the constitution, something which Museveni has pointed at a lot as well. We fought Obote and all that, which he has done worse. But there was a scenario where the MPs got the new constitution in their pigeonholes. It was changed, and this is the new constitution. Everybody, this is what we are going by. And they asked one minister that, have you read the new constitution? He said, I haven't, but I support it. Now that became a symbol of the sort of chronism that there was at that time, that anything Obote does at the day was right.
At the time he was comfortable to sleep and simply raise the hand.
But I support it. Now, right now, we have people who are scared, and now here's the thing, here's the problem. Even when we come and we are saying we want a transition away to good leadership, the citizen, there's a big segment of the citizens who are scared because they kind of know where they stand in this system. So they are they're scared of the future. They don't know where they will stand in the future, and a sort of an unknown future. So they kind of hold on to this system. Some of them even oil it and try to pretend that, keep it around, because they're saying, at least here, I'm going to get something here, and so on, until everybody is convinced that actually we can create a Uganda that is better for everybody, okay? And that they do not have to hold on to a rotting system because they don't know what the new system will bring for them. Then
they are afraid of the unknown.
Yeah, so many people are afraid of the unknown, and that's why they actually hold on to this thing. And actually, Museveni has done that, trying to make sure that scaring people. Okay, you're getting fear. Instilling fear.
Let's give the final word to Sarah Birete to more like it, wrap this up and show us the way forward.
To me, I think the picture at Kororo yesterday was a demonstration that the people had nothing to celebrate. The chairs were largely empty. I know there were excuses of COVID and Ebola, but I want to remind citizens that during swearing in 2021, we were under partial lockdown because of COVID, but Kororo was full. So you cannot today say Kororo is empty because citizens have nothing to celebrate, that the reason is COVID, which is no longer existing. So Ugandans, this independence belongs to you. You must make sure you get your freedom, you get your liberties, you get your human dignity. In the absence of that, we have no independence to celebrate as a country.
All right, reflecting on 60 years of Uganda's independence, Joseph Kabuleta and Sarah Birete, many thanks for the insight and perspective. This discussion cannot be exhausted in a single day. We failed to exhaust it for the last how many years? 36. We do hope, of course, that those that come after us shall be able to project a new kind of direction for the country, but most importantly, you as an individual, before you look at who must be able to change the situation by doing the right thing at the right time, because it goes a long way in ensuring that if one person does the right thing and so many people do the right thing, then perhaps we will be able to move the way we want to move. Otherwise, sometimes others say the blame game doesn't count. That's it for this edition of Morning at 10 TV. It's been a pleasure having your company as always. It's a bright Monday and a glorious day, no doubt. We hope when you go out there, you will reflect on a lot of things, especially in light of the fact that Uganda is now 60 years independent. Good morning.